Born on October 28, 1944, Thea Lavoy Jones, a Cleveland, Tennessee native, attended school and would go on to enroll in the University of Tennessee and Lee College. In 1968, Jones was drafted by the United States Army just weeks away from graduation. As a medic attached to a Special Forces unit, Jones was shipped to the Mekong Delta in Vietnam, where he would receive his first award, the Purple Heart, for injuries he received on just his first day in combat. Over the course of his tour and more than 120 airdrops into various combat zones, Jones would go on to receive many other awards, including a Bronze Star for Valor. Early one morning, Jones' platoon was ambushed by a Viet Cong unit. Under heavy enemy fire, Jones' group was losing men rapidly. As a last resort, Jones called in numerous artillery strikes just yards away from their position, a risky decision that would save the lives of 4 soldiers. For the many awards and decorations Jones received during his tour in Vietnam, Jones would be recognized as the most decorated veteran in Bradley County history. In 2018, Thea Lavoy Jones was awarded the state of Tennessee's highest honor as Colonel Aide-de-Camp, a designation normally reserved for high-ranking officers. Among the very few enlisted men to receive this honor, 2 notable Tennesseans stand out, Lavoy Jones and Elvis Presley. After the war, Jones would go on to own and operate a printing business in Cleveland, Tennessee, where he still lives today with his wife Brenda and many of his family. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Cleveland and Bradley County's most decorated veteran in history, Lavoy Jones.
Well, I'm Perry Stone, and we want to welcome you today. I'm here with Lavoy Jones, who is a very close friend of our family, all the way back to when me and Pam moved here back in, I should say Pam and I, let's get proper grammar here. When Pam and I moved here to Cleveland many years ago, he worked at Carroll Printing. Ralph Carroll was the head of the print shop, and he was on my board, and Lavoy and I became very dear friends and had been friends since 1982, when we were a little bit younger.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, the story I'm going to share with you, or the stories we're going to share with you today, are very interesting. My dad, many years ago, began to tell me about a man by the name of Thea Jones, who was greatly touched of the Lord during the healing revival. Actually, in the it would be the late 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, yes, that time frame. This is his son. So if you've ever heard me tell stories about Thea Jones, some of the miracles that happened, Lavoy, his son, was actually present when most of these events happened that you've heard me talk about over the years. So what I'd like to do, Lavoy, is go back to the earliest days that you can remember of your father and your mother, Billy, who was, yes, a great woman of God, by the way, amazing woman, yes, of God. And tell us what you remember in the earliest days, and we'll take it up to when your dad got called into the healing ministry, which I think is very intriguing.
Well, man, going back to my earliest memories, yep, like when I was 3 or 4, we lived in Cleveland, Tennessee, Country Club Drive, and my earliest memories were people would bring to our house in Cleveland ambulances, people sick, you know, and so that was my earliest memories.
So your dad, for your dad to pray for them is what it was?
Yes, yeah.
How did you ever have any, and I mean this sincerely, how did you ever have any peace of mind or rest? They could just show up at any moment? Would that happen?
You know, that is so true. Yeah.
So at any
exactly.
moment.
So I mean that's my earliest memories.
So going back to when your dad was called to the ministry, he was called as a young teenager, wasn't he? Very young.
He was in the 6th grade.
Really?
My
wow.
Well, my early history of my dad is kind of, well, his daddy was a bootlegger. How else can I put
Everybody
it?
was back then in the mountains.
In the hills of Kentucky.
Kentucky, yeah, I was going to say, Kentucky, that happened a lot.
He was a bootlegger. The law started closing in on my granddaddy. So my daddy, in the 6th grade, moved to the town of Cincinnati. We're hiding from the law.
Oh,
so
wow.
Understand.
So he went across the river, actually.
Yes, across the river.
That's really what happened.
Across the bridge.
Across the bridge.
Across the river. Well, the law caught up with my granddaddy, and they put him in prison. My daddy was playing hooky from the school in Cincinnati, and he ended up in a Church of God, the 42nd Street Church of God, and
which was very famous at that time. I remember that.
Yeah.
Very well known.
Yeah. And he was saved. I mean,
wow.
Whenever in the 6th grade. And amazingly enough, he started preaching at that early age.
Wow. That was like early teens, wasn't it?
Yeah, very early. So my grandmother took him back to the hometown in Kentucky, and my daddy started evangelizing at a teenager.
And what was the gift he had as far as memory? Because everybody's told me that they've never met anybody that could, like Ralph, how was Ralph related to you, by the way?
Uncle Ralph, my mother's brother.
That's it. So Uncle Ralph, who was on my board, told me that your dad could literally read a page from a book.
Yes.
Then he could tell you what he read.
Yes.
Just by reading it one time.
Yes.
But he did that with the Bible too, correct?
Yes. My daddy could, and he didn't have to preach. He could quote chapter after chapter after chapter in the Bible, just by memory.
In his teens.
In his teens.
Now,
yes.
To show you how fascinating that was back then for a young kid, a teenager, he preached at what was the Church of God General Assembly, which was the gathering of all the ministers and their wives. In what year we talked about that? Was it the 30s or late 30s?
1936, the General Assembly of the Church of God.
And he was about, I think, 17 to 19. I don't remember
that
the
is
exact.
Correct.
And they said he stood a microphone up and quoted two. Now, Dr. C. French, who was there then as a young man, said that your dad quoted like 200 scriptures on the Holy Spirit, and he would comment real brief between, and the power of God hit, and everybody in the whole place fell out under the power.
That's what I understand.
And that's what he was there.
Yeah.
And he said, I saw it with my own eyes.
Yeah.
Now, your dad later, when you all were living in Chattanooga, he pastored at that time. Is that correct?
Yes.
Now that was before the Healing Revival ministry really got started.
That
right?
is correct.
He was a good pastor. The church
Yes.
was growing. Tell me the fast he went on and the angel that came to him, because this was very well known.
Okay, my daddy went on a 30-day fast, just drinking water, and God told him he would have the. Would you call it ministry of healing?
Yeah, ministry, right.
Okay, ministry of healing. And so my daddy at that time started going from church to church and having tremendous, unbelievable meetings.
Now, after the Lord appeared to him in that fast, this is what we were told.
Yes.
That he started, he went to Bluefield, West Virginia. Were you at Bluefield?
No.
Okay.
I mean, I might have been there, but
you wouldn't have.
Yeah.
So Bluefield, West Virginia, they had, I want to get the number right, it was tens and tens of thousands of people that showed up during the meeting, the biggest meeting ever held in the history of that part of West Virginia. And from that point on, he had a tent, correct?
Yes.
You had a tent. Now, I want you to go back to the early days of when the miracles that you actually saw that you can remember.
Okay. I was very young, and my mother played the organ for my dad at the time, and I just remember playing in the sawdust in the tent. That was it. But the meetings were huge.
Now, you're talking 10, 15,000 people sometimes.
And I remember they would have a ramp built up where people would get in line.
Like Oral Roberts did. He sat in the middle, and they'd come up the ramp and down the ramp.
That's exactly right.
Right.
And I remember that as a child.
Do you remember Gorders disappearing? Because I heard a lot of people say that.
For some reason, that was a big thing back then. You never hear of a Gorders now.
Right.
But yes.
A lot of people
and
had
you could almost visibly see the Gorders go away.
Yeah. My dad said in War, West Virginia, they put the tent up in War, West Virginia.
Yes.
And your dad would pray, "You foul choking spirit." He didn't call it a Gorder. And he said, "You found." Yeah, that's what he
I believe it.
prayed.
Yes,
and
yes.
he said, because you said you were a little bit young in those particular meetings, and he said that thing would melt. Just like you took snow and put fire on it, it would just go down, and you'd have real baggy skin. And usually they were around the neck of the individual.
Almost, yes.
Now, there was a miracle that happened, and I'll tell you who told me about this miracle was Monroe Horn, who was an older minister that pastored in Kentucky, who was in your dad's meetings as a boy. He had gotten healed. Monroe had been blind. And he said, I couldn't see, hardly my hand in front of me. And I'm not sure if it was your dad who prayed for him, but I know he got completely healed.
Yes.
But your dad went to, and I'm going to tell you how it was told me, and you see if you can add to, or maybe you can say, well, it was a little different, because I want to make sure.
Yeah.
This is why I wanted to get you, just to see what you could remember. It was somewhere in the Carolinas, and it was church, and there was a group of men in the town that told this girl whose brother was born blind to the point that he just had white sockets. He didn't have any color, retina, pupil, nothing. It was just white sockets, totally blind. That, there's a man up there that can heal your brother. And this little girl came to the service. Your dad, I think, had either was in the middle of preaching or he just finished getting ready for the prayer line. And this girl walks right down the middle of the aisle and says, they told me you could heal my brother. And the conversation was basically, well, honey, what's wrong with your brother? Well, he had his eyes closed. So your dad opened them up, and there's eyeballs, but there's nothing there like retina, pupil, or iris. So Monroe, your dad said, I can't heal him, but the Lord can. How many of you believe God can heal? They would do that back then. So Monroe Horn said, your dad opened up his eyelids, and there's nothing there but two white sockets, right?
I have never heard this story.
Are you serious?
Go ahead, Perry. I can hardly wait to hear it.
Yeah. And so he opened up his eyelids and said, Monroe said, I stood behind him a few feet away because I had been blind.
Yes.
And two little blue dots appeared, and they started forming. Yeah. See, I didn't know if you were in that meeting or not. But
now, Perry, is this a Perry story?
No, really, your mom was in the meeting. And
Okay.
I'll tell you how he remembered that your mom would go down the line and could tell if people had faith or not. Right? And she would tell, she was doing that or going to do that, or the line was prepared. And when the boy got healed, he started screaming, crying, and your dad made him match colors. This is blue, and he was matching it. And so when he got outside, all the people wanted to see his eyes. And Monroe said, I saw him form. He was born that way.
Are you listening to this?
Yeah, he's heard it for years. See, I didn't know if you were in the meeting. That's why I was asking, because that could have been before, that could have been after. It was a long time ago. And Monroe Horn was on the platform 3 feet away. He was a Church of God pastor, a bishop. And he told me this when I was 18, so that tells you how long ago it was for me to hear it. And so when the boy went outside, he heard the train. He said, that's a train, that's a train. And he saw a cat go by meowing, that's a cat. And everybody wanted to see his eyes, and he was saying, get out of my way, move. He says, I want to see this, I want to see this, And so that was probably that Monroe said it was the greatest miracle he ever saw.
Yes.
And it was, I don't want to say Raleigh, I don't want to say the place, but it was in North Carolina. It was when he was younger, but he'd been healed, and that's why when that girl came in, they did it mockingly, not her, but the men did it mockingly, and that was, he said, that was the greatest single miracle because I used to ask pastors, what's the greatest miracle? Now, did you know Coyne, who could take his eye out?
Yes, Ron
Coyne. Now, did your dad pray for him?
Yes, and I knew
Wait, your dad
boy.
is the one that prayed for him?
Yes, at the... this was a meeting in Chattanooga.
Really?
Yes.
Now tell me what you remember about that, because
he came and stayed with us.
Did he have
for a period of time?
He had a glass eye.
A glass eye. But this is going to sound kind of gross, but he would take it. He would, while we were playing in the playground, because we were both in our young, like 8 or 9, he would pop out. I said, I want to see this. As kids, I want to see this. So he would pop out his glass eye, hold his hand, and I would count or something. Yeah.
So this is the fact.
He could see out.
He could see out of a glass eye.
A glass eye.
And
or the socket without the glass eye.
Yeah. So the thing was, the story told in Voice of Healing.
Yes.
Okay.
That's correct.
said that his mother brought him to be prayed for, it wasn't even his eye. And whoever prayed, which would have been your dad, I'm assuming, saw the eye and thought something was wrong with the eye and didn't know that, thought maybe he was just blind in the eye and it was kind of a still, but it's a glass eye.
Yeah.
And so he asked God, instead of the prayer the mama wanted, he asked God, I want you to give him a miracle, create a miracle, or touch his eye.
Yes.
And after that, and I know people, if you've never heard of this sounds, it does.
It does.
It sounds so far-fetched and so far out, but the man was tested. And they were actually patched the good eye up.
Oh, they were patched it so good you couldn't believe.
No. And
unbelievable.
And they take the good eye out, and he could still see everything, colors and everything. And it was the most unusual. That's what you call probably a creative miracle. It's about as real as Jesus putting the ear back on somebody and the nerves reconnecting, because there's millions of nerves on the ear. That's like a creative miracle, you know. But you said you actually knew him personally.
Oh, yeah.
Where did he live? Do you remember years ago where he lived?
I just remember when he stayed with us like for a week or so.
Wow. Did he travel?
He would pop that eye out. You could cover it up all you want. They could see through the eye socket. You could take the glass eye out, and he could see through the whatever hole there was.
Did the doctors ever say to him, did he ever? I know he went back and they just said they didn't want to touch it because it scared him, I think.
Yeah.
But did anybody ever say, there is no explanation for this? They pretty much did, didn't they?
I was walking out of a grocery store, and I saw one of these like Star magazines where you don't believe, like aliens come to one of those magazines, and on the front page was this young man
named Coyne, I believe was his name, right?
Ronnie Coyne.
Ronnie Coyne, that's right.
And a man that can see through his eye socket. So I bought the magazine, of course, and it had his story.
But it had a story in there. Isn't it? Now, that's probably the strangest thing you ever saw.
Oh, for sure.
Now, your dad also went to, and we're talking about the revival days, but he went to Sevierville. Now, this was told me by Ralph, which is your uncle.
Yes.
And Ralph knew him real well.
Yes.
I mean, very, very well. And they went to Sevierville, I believe, put up a tent, a big tent. You might have been in this one as a kid. And so they start talking about bring people that need miracles, and they went to a deaf and dumb school. Now you don't say deaf and dumb today because the word dumb is almost an insult. You don't say a child's dumb. But we would say today deaf and mute.
Yes.
So that's what we're talking about in case the old, King James calls it deaf and dumb. That's old school right there. Yeah. But anyway, they went to this school and brought a bunch of kids, and Ralph told me, he says, I watched. He said, not all the kids were healed, but he said there were some of them. Yeah. And one that got healed named Al Taylor. Remember?
Yes.
And Al, I don't know if it was deafness or blindness or what it was, but Al ended up being a leader in the Church of God.
Yes.
Was he from the Home for Children? Is that right? It seems to me, no?
I don't think so.
Do you know, Charlie, was Al ever raised in the Home for Children?
I don't think so.
I think they lived in the area then, though.
They did.
Okay, that's what it was.
Yeah.
That's why I'm thinking the connection there. And so, do you remember any of that at all as a kid, of him praying for just...
No, but Al Taylor himself had told me about the...
Yeah, and I knew Al.
Yeah.
But I had never known Al had gotten healed.
Yeah.
Like that. See, that's amazing to me because Al, now is Al still living? I think.
North Cleveland Church of God.
So Al can tell you some stories because he saw some great things. Mm-hmm. Now, we might go back to something else, but I want to show you this picture because what happened, tell us about this says 1957 Sunday night service.
Yes.
This is not even Sunday morning.
That's correct.
Now, if you don't believe people went to church, I'm going to show you this in a minute. Tell me about the story with Jack Coe going to Philadelphia with his tent, largest tent in the world at that time. I think he was 4 foot bigger than Oral Roberts, so that made it the largest.
Actually, it was. And when they went to the tent maker, it's the same one that did Oral Roberts, and they made sure it was bigger.
4 foot bigger.
Yeah.
So Jack began to say, which probably was not a good thing, but he was beginning to say, I got the world's biggest tent,
Yes.
So anyway, but Jack was a very unique, he was very... they called him the common preacher for the common man because he was just blunt and hardcore, and people would get healed. I mean, really healed, and people would stand up on chairs and he would scream, "Get out of my chairs! Get out! I paid money for somebody just got healed," and he'd do that, you know. Now, Jack went to put up the tent, and take us from there, because you told me the story a moment ago, how that led to the Metropolitan Opera House in your dad pastoring at the Met. They called it the Met. So start with Jack.
Jack Coe, as Perry said, had a tremendous tent. They claim it was the biggest tent in the world, but it might have been evangelistically speaking.
Maybe 4 feet.
But it was huge.
Yeah.
And Jack Coe would pass. Well, wherever Jack Coe went, for some reason, he had a physical problem. And I think
he actually passed with polio one time.
Yes.
But he started having, and he was very, Gordon Lindsay said he was very overweight. And that was hurting him.
Well, my dad would take over meetings from Jack Coe in his tent meetings. And Jack Coe set up a tent in Philadelphia. Mm-hmm. And he got ill, and my dad took over the meeting. And the meeting went on and on and on for weeks after week after week.
Now they didn't take a night off back then, hardly, did they?
You're right. And so my dad and Jack Coe decided it would be a good place just to start a church. And so my dad started a church. It started out in like most people then, a theater. Mm-hmm. And then miraculously, there was a building called the Metropolitan Opera House, downtown Philadelphia. It's actually about 4 or 5 blocks from the courthouse. And
a beautiful building that day, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
Amazing building.
It took up a whole square block, 6 or 7 stories tall. And it was used for entertainment, like basketball and just whatever anybody needed an auditorium for. So somehow my daddy was just like 32, 34 years old. There's the owner of the building, Toppler. He sold it to my dad on time. And so my daddy ended up with this church right here.
Okay, now I want to show you the picture. This is an actual picture from 1950. Let's see, what was that I say? 57. Now, Thea is the man on the platform. That's your dad.
Yeah.
And what's interesting about this, I was told it held at its peak 10,000 people. With all the balconies.
Evangelistically speaking.
Is that?
I would say more like 7.
But they had.
But they said 10. If you included the stage.
With people sitting on
it could be 10,000.
Yeah. So in other words, the whole building would hold about 10,000.
Yeah.
This was considered at the time the largest church in America. I don't think there was even a Baptist church. Baptists had big churches.
The world.
And you know what? In 57, it may have been.
I know.
No, it really, because I can't think of in the 50s of anybody having a church over 1,000 to 1,500, especially Pentecostal. Charismatic movement hadn't come along then.
Yeah.
And so, but on Sunday morning, now look at this again. This is packed on a Sunday night.
Yeah.
People used to go to church on Sunday nights, didn't they?
Yes.
And let me ask you, were you in services here?
I'm in that picture.
Do you know where you're at?
Yes, I do. See that little spot right here? That's me on the very edge.
What?
Yes.
Let me see. That's you. You're sitting in the
those
back.
spots you're putting. I always sat right there. Right here, up here.
Look at you couldn't see it, so I'm not going to show you. You can't see him. He's
can't
hiding.
See it. No.
Now, what do you remember occurring like in the services? Were there prayer lines then, like there were, or mostly? Always a prayer line.
Always.
Now, there was a little apartment in the back, and that apartment was no bigger than this room, I don't think.
That's correct.
And this is not a big room, but your dad actually lived in the apartment.
Yes.
In the latter part of his life.
Yes.
And do you remember seeing amazing things happen at the Met from time to time?
Always.
Really?
Yeah.
What were some of the things that stand out in your mind that you saw when the prayers were prayed or when people prayed?
Well, my daddy was an amazing minister. He could get up and just quote scripture after scripture after scripture. And his sermons were rather short. My mother directed a wonderful choir.
Here?
Yes. That's
Wow.
the Met. Yeah, and it was rocking. In fact,
I
it
bet
was
it was.
voted. They had a big contest in Philadelphia, but anyway,
Wow.
of all the churches would bring the choir, and
She'd smoke it every
she
time.
just smoked it. No doubt about it.
I can't believe it, because let me say this and hold our thought. But his mother Billy was over the youth choir, children's choir at North Cleveland when I came there as in a revival.
Yes.
And I mean, she had those. I'm talking kids. They'd pray before church, wouldn't they? They'd be praying and falling out in the spirit and just it. Listen.
Yeah.
When I say she was a really, really major woman of God, we should have interviewed her years ago. We didn't do that, and I regret that.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm getting you on here, because I want to keep these stories going, you know? So you remember the prayer lines. What's some of the things that you saw and you say, wow, that's pretty amazing?
Yeah, the miracles were just unbelievable. The 50s and early 60s were known at that time for miracles of healing. And it was just amazing. I mean, that's all I can say. It was amazing.
They brought people in ambulances even to this meeting, didn't they?
Yes, they did.
And a lot of cancer. I know a lot of people had cancer back then. Were getting prayed for leukemia.
Yes.
I think polio was really big at that point.
And as you said, goiters would just disappear.
Now imagine seeing somebody with a goiter that it looks like a little ball that's under their skin.
Yes, it does.
And then my dad was in the meetings in West Virginia. He'd touch it like this.
Yeah.
And he'd say, "You foul choking spirit, I command you to let this woman go." And he'd touch it. And Dad said, your dad would say, my dad would said this, that your dad would say, "Swallow." And they would swallow, and the whole thing would just gone.
Yeah.
And you know, it builds other people's faith in the audience, obviously.
Right.
And then the next person, you don't have to say, "Now, do you believe?" Because you've seen something happen.
Right.
Let me ask you this, from your perspective of knowing. Let me ask. I'm going to jump all over the place here. Who were the other ministers? Did you ever know A.A. Allen?
A.A. Allen was his competition in the town. Yeah, it was.
So if y'all were in the
before we go to our church, we go by A.A. Allen's church to just see his crowd to make sure, that we were bigger. Sorry, guys. Pastors can be competitive at times.
They can.
Then the other one was Shambach.
Shambach was going strong then, wasn't he?
Brenda, close your ears. I dated Shambach's daughter. Took her
I know
to the
her.
prom.
Really?
Yeah.
Took her to the prom. By the way, he's talking to his wife over here, who's now going to hit him with the rolling pin. No, I'm just kidding. These are old things anyway.
Yes,
it's like I told my wife, honey, the other ones didn't get me. You're the one that got me, So, and I got you, so we're happy. You know what I'm saying? But of course, now you knew Cole. Did your dad meet Oral Roberts? He knew Oral Roberts too, right?
Yes. Oral Roberts, when he would come to Cleveland, Daddy would be one of the sponsors. Do you know Vep Ellis?
Yes.
Okay, he was Oral Roberts' front man at the time. And
he was a singer too sometimes. I don't know if he sang with.
That's correct.
Well, now, at the Met, because I've preached in this building, and it doesn't look like this now, it's much smaller, but a minister bought the Met, and I was telling Lavoy, I was at a Morris Sorella meeting, and I met this man, Pastor Hatcher, and I asked him about showing me the Met. And hanging up is a picture about this size, and on the platform is William Branham, Oral Roberts, Moore. I think there was a preacher named Moore, healing evangelist named Moore. Your dad. There's 5 men. It is a very, very famous picture. And I think what happened there, did Branham ever preach there, William Branham?
William Branham not only preached there, he stayed at our house when he preached there.
Really?
Yeah.
So he did preach there?
Yeah, and I met, of course I knew him.
Now Branham was really amazing, wasn't he?
Yes,
that was a gift from God that was probably, I've only known one man on the earth right now. And I called him. And I'm going to ask people, don't call me and ask me his name for you to call him, because I don't give people's numbers out, And if it's God's will for you to ever meet the person, then you'll meet him. But he was so precise. He's never met me. He doesn't know me. He doesn't speak English. And I asked him one question, and he told me everything I had prayed that day, everything I had done that day. He told me about my cousin's death in a car wreck. and all the things connected to that. He named all of my financial supporters by name.
Yes.
And he has never, I'm telling you, let me just say this. He only knew what God knew. And I knew that, okay? Well, Branham had that gift, and you saw it.
Oh, yes.
I mean, it's like your name, your dad. But it's not just telling people something. When he prayed, things would happen.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So,
yes.
So I believe it was Roberts. In fact, I'm sure it was Roberts who was preaching it. Now, Roberts tells us this story. And I want to say, in my reading this story, I believe it happened here. Because I believe that Hatcher may have even told me. Oral Roberts said that he would never go to preach till he felt the power of God in his right hand. He just wasn't going to do it.
Yeah.
That was a vow he made to the Lord. I'll
Yes.
not pray. So he was at the hotel.
Yes.
And they came to pick him up.
Yes.
I'm not ready. Okay. And the reason he wasn't ready is he had prayed for a while and felt nothing. And he told the Lord, and 15 minutes later, sir, he said, leave me alone, I'm not ready. And 30 minutes later, sir, we really have to go. And he turned to the Lord, he said, you know, I will not go in that building to pray for people till I feel your anointing.
Yes.
And he said, when he said that, he felt the Holy Spirit jerk his right hand.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
Yes.
And he said, he grabbed his coat and said, let's get there. And by the time he got there, your dad was waiting. They had people singing or whatever. And your dad was waiting, and he saw him. He said, now, all right. And he came in at the time that your dad was about to introduce him.
Yeah.
Isn't that amazing? Is that a neat story?
Yes.
But
story.
that happened here at the Met.
Yes.
So your dad, which was Thea Jones, now people who are not familiar with the healing revival from the 30s and 40s, early 40s, would not have known your dad, but everybody in the Church of God knew your dad.
Yeah.
I mean, literally everybody. And the crowds, what were some of the crowds in the tent in the early days? I mean, what was like your biggest attendance that came as far as people to hear the word?
There were so many people that they would have cars with people lined up in the cars outside of the tent where you couldn't even get in the tent. That's how big the crowds were at that time.
So there were times, 10, 12, 15,000 maybe.
I would imagine.
At least. And some of them sat in their cars because they couldn't even get a seat.
That's what I'm talking about.
And turn it down. They turn the PA system.
Yes.
Sometimes they put the speakers outside too.
That is correct.
Now, we're going to jump around here for a moment. That was a season, the Healing Revival was a season that ran probably between 1948, I'm talking about the major move, to about 55, maybe to 58. A lot of the men did take churches eventually. Yeah. You know, everybody started a ministry, what we'd call a headquarters ministry.
Yeah.
What was the difference between, in your opinion, why there were so many answers to prayer and miracles then versus today?
Oh my goodness, Perry. You know,
just if we compare.
Now this is just kind of me.
Yeah, that's what I want.
This is no one else.
No, that's why I want your opinion on it.
I think that was a special time in God's plan to build people's faith. And that's just me.
It was a season.
It was a season. That's the word I'm looking for.
And it
that
actually
was a season. I think it went on into the early 60s.
Yeah, because they were still having tents up and everything.
Yeah.
Brother Lowry had his up till, I think, 64.
Yeah.
So, now T.L. Lowry, though, was never connected with... Did he ever connect with your dad in the earlier days? Do you know, Brother Lowry?
I don't think so.
Yeah, I think that they were like two separate paths as far as where they were preaching.
Yes,
your dad spent a lot of time in the Northeast, I know.
That is correct.
Baltimore,
Yes.
New York, and so on. Now, you got to tell this story about how you all started the church in New York and who was also meeting in the same place and what happened before your service. The Malcolm X story.
Okay. My dad started a church in New York, and we would have 2 meetings on Sunday.
Do you remember the year roughly?
It was in the 58, 59.
Yeah.
58, 59 time period. And often we would get on a train and travel to New York, and we rented a banquet hall. And on the night before Malcolm X, I don't know if these people know who Malcolm X is, but
He was a black leader
black leader.
back in that day.
I think a Muslim maybe. So he would have the night before we would come up, and Malcolm X was actually killed on a Saturday before we met on Sunday.
On that particular weekend.
On that particular weekend. So
Wow.
that was my story
Now,
with
did
Malcolm
it?
X.
Okay, let me ask you this. That caused a really big stirring. I know it. We're all over the United States, the
Yeah.
black community. But were you able to have service that Sunday, or did they just say, you know what?
No, we had service.
Did
Yeah.
did a lot of people come out even despite that had just happened?
Yes,
there?
yes, they did.
So, but they killed him at that hall, right, or in going outside or something like that. I
It
don't
was in the
remember.
hall itself.
Wow,
Yeah.
wow. So you guys were there the next next
very
day.
next day we were there. Yeah.
Wow. But I bet that was huge news at that time. I mean, up in that
Oh,
area.
it was.
Were there riots then? Do you remember? I'm not sure there were riots.
I don't know.
Because I think a black man killed him. I mean, I hope I'm not wrong in shape.
You are
but I'm
correct.
pretty sure.
Yes.
So if it would have been a racial thing, there would have really been some major problems.
Yeah.
But I think that's one thing that happened there, and I don't know. I've watched the story one time, but I don't remember the details about it, at that particular time. So that was a season. Now let me talk about the ministers, because obviously the ministers of that era, how much did these guys, when these guys being like your dad, did your dad fast a lot after he did the 30-day? Was he still fasting at times, and to your knowledge?
Oh, yes. Yeah.
So what would be his average, like 3 days or a week? Did he fast between meetings?
I would say a week.
So in other words, to keep the flow going in his life, he didn't
would
just
fast.
pray or study.
Yeah.
You see, my dad was that way. My dad was
Yeah.
always, even in his 70s, he'd say he'd fast 3 days.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was the thing about this
you were right,
generation. It was
Terry.
very
Yes.
normal.
Yes.
Brother Lowry fasted. I think Lowry fasted twice 40 days. I'm gonna look at Charlie. Is that right? 2 different occasions. It was a 40-day fast. Now back then, and this is not being negative toward how some people give up certain things during a fast. We know that can happen. But in the old days, you ate nothing. It wasn't, I'm avoiding this and this and this, To me, if you start avoiding stuff, what you're basically doing is saying, I'm going on a diet because I won't eat bread and rice and potatoes, if I want to lose weight.
Yeah.
Back then, they literally said, no food, nothing but water. And Brother Lowry would take ice cubes and chew on them because in his mind, you can actually trick your mind. I asked him one day, I said, what is that? He says, it just tricks your mind that you're eating when you're not.
Yeah.
And it makes it a little bit easier on your mind. And he always carried a cup of ice everywhere he went, ice. And he'd just sit there and just chew on ice, which is water, And there's nothing wrong with that at all. But my thing is, with all these men, you read their life stories, and there is a fasting point. There's a fasting point where something happens to them. They either receive a word from the Lord, or it's a very strong prophetic word from another minister, and sometimes they'll either in a dream have an angel. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, either your dad had an angel in a dream, or he actually saw one that actually told him that. And this is somebody that knew him that he would have not only have a healing ministry, but if he would believe without doubting, there wouldn't be a disease that would stand in front of him when he would pray in the name of Jesus. Yeah. And so I think that's very, very profound, when you start thinking about it. Is there any particular, and I know this is going back, like it would be like asking me, Perry, when you were 10, what do you remember about Big Stone Gap? It's like, well, you should have asked me 30 years ago. I could have told you something. Is there one particular miracle or one particular thing you saw that all these years has impressed your mind? I do know a story that didn't happen really in your dad's ministry, but that would be your aunt, Ruth.
Yes.
Which is Ralph's wife. Who was the kid that was playing behind the car and got run over?
That was her youngest brother, Bill.
His name was Bill?
Yes.
And they thought he was going to die.
Yes, yes.
I mean, it was awful.
Yes.
And she said this would be Muncie, right?
Right.
Brother Muncie, which is Ruth's dad, was like a bishop, maybe it was a local bishop, I'm not sure it was a state bishop, in the Church of God, and he made a vow to God, and he said to the Lord, I don't know if you remember this or not, but he said, if you will take care of my business,
Yeah.
I'll always take care of yours.
Yeah.
And so he was on his way to a meeting he had to be at, and he runs over his kid,
Yes.
who's playing behind the car,
Yes.
and they pull the kid out, right?
Yes, yes.
And Ruth said, Perry, you don't want to
Yeah.
know what he looked like.
Yeah.
Because the way he hit or landed or
Yeah.
how, but one of his eyes was popped out
Yeah.
and said he was out of it and said, Daddy said, God, you remember my vow.
Yeah.
You have to take care of my boy. And he drove off.
Yes.
And Ruth said, I never will forget, we kids were screaming mad. What is he
Yeah.
doing? And the mama, which would be Ruth's mom,
Yes.
said, go lay him in the bed. And they carried him in the bed.
Yeah.
And they got to, this is heavy. And they got to praying.
Yes.
And she said the eye went back, the swelling went down. In
Yes.
about a couple hours or whatever it was later, he's out playing.
He's at play.
After he gets run over.
Yes. Yes.
That happened, right? Just
Yes.
like that.
Yeah.
So that to me, when she told me that, and she told me this years ago before she passed away, that was one of the really real outstanding things.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have one in particular that you think is, that you can think of anywhere at any time that you said, wow, that's pretty amazing?
Well, we talked about Ron Goins already with the
Oh, Cohen, Ronald, yeah, Cohen.
yes with the
The
seeing through the eye through
Yeah,
a socket.
and that was probably the greatest one you ever saw.
Yeah, and
knew him.
I knew him, and he could pop that eye out, and I could have it cover up his eye, and he could just as kids playing, 8, 9 years old.
Now,
that was amazing.
And I got to ask you this, but in the Healing Revival era,
Yes,
now your dad was a part of that. You got your dad, just to name a few, Branham, A.A. Allen,
Yes.
Oral Roberts, Jack Cole, E.L. Terry came in that, T.L. Lowry, Morris Sorella,
Yes.
R.W. Shambach, and the list goes on. It was just there was about 25 men at one
Yes.
time, and they could just about pack out any auditorium. Now, looking in retrospect, a
Yes.
lot of those men, like R.W. Shambach, continued to preach,
Mm-hmm.
very faithful to God, passed away. Dr. Lowry continued to preach.
Yeah.
And he was with the Church of God denomination, passed away, great faith. My dad is another example, passed away at 78, but always, they call it toe the line, boys, you know.
Yeah.
They would toe the line, great integrity, always
Yeah.
tried to battle for the faith. And I could name, Brother Sorella was the same way. Morris, up to the day he passed away, was having world conferences. He flew around the world. So, but in that era of, let's say, the 60s, there was some problems that came with alcohol, for example, in some instances. And there was other what was the hindrance that affected, in your opinion, the two or three things that affected some of the ministers in their life? We're talking about men that saw miracles and healings and deliverances, and God visited them. So what happened along the way, I'm going to give you my opinion first. I think the men wore themselves out.
Yeah.
I think they wore out mentally, physically, and spiritually. And when they got wore out, they couldn't fight.
yeah,
They couldn't fight with strength. So they gave into a lot of different things because they just they were burnt out, you know. But that's just my opinion based on some things that I have watched. And I've studied just about all the Healing Revival evangelists, you know, and they tell you these things. So what would you say, though, was the biggest hindrances?
and this is more of a personal.
Sure.
Okay. These people were independents, okay?
Right.
They had no guidance from an outside source, like
No one to answer to.
no. Very well put. No one to answer to.
Yeah. Like if they got in an error,
Yes.
they just got in an error instead of
Yeah.
some men coming and saying, stop.
Yeah.
And what you're
They
preaching
had
here is
no
not,
stopping thing.
Yeah.
So, plus the money was big. I mean, money can
And you have
influence
to,
you.
And you have to have people that know how to handle that
exactly
and do the
Yeah.
right thing and protect it on staff too.
Yes. Yeah.
You know, not just the
Yes.
minister themselves.
So that was big, and not having to answer to someone, and no guidance,
Accountability.
and no
Yeah.
accountability, and I don't want to say getting a big head, but you
Pride.
Pride. There
Yeah.
you go, Perry. You're good with words. Pride. Pride took over.
I've studied this a lot, you know.
Pride took
Yeah.
over. And plus, you became famous. People wanted to get around you. Women would
Right.
flock to you, so there was always a problem with a lady coming up to you.
What stops that is a good wife.
You are so right,
really.
Perry.
And
You are
if
really
a good wife,
correct.
because I have
Yes.
known of pastors,
Yes.
not pastors or ministers, pastors of churches, that, like you said, they got up there and became,
Yes.
and somebody gets infatuated with the
Yes.
anointing,
Yes.
and or being popular. And boy, you know, my wife, I have to say this, but there's been times when we would be at a church, and there would be some girl, and this is how they dressed at the church, okay?
Yes, yes.
And she'd have some short dress on, and my wife would go right up to her and say, "You need to get off the front row, because my husband ain't gonna be
Go
watching
pow.
you." No, and people know
yes,
she's done
yes,
this.
I know.
And if a woman, this is true, if a woman was around,
Yeah.
we were going to hire sometime back. We talked about it, I should say. We were going over names of people to hire, and we brought up a name, and of course I would never tell who the name is on a video. Most people ain't gonna know him anyway. And my wife said, "I'd never hire that female." Why? Because of how she dresses.
Yeah.
That's the kind of person you need around you.
Right.
You know, instead of just, yes, oh, whatever you think.
Yeah, yeah.
Because if I'm thinking anything and she is in disagreement with it, she will look at me and she'll say, "I don't agree with you." And so I think that in some instances, and here's another thing, a lot of times when these men traveled, and even Billy Graham, you know, surrounded himself with men. He traveled a lot without his family, without his wife. Oral Roberts had to travel for weeks without his wife, and so on. And I think if a man does that, what I have learned and what I've observed is you have to have a team of men. Like when I go anywhere, if Pam's not with me, Charlie will always go. If Charlie can't go, Daniel Baker always goes. And they're always next door to me in the hotel. I never answer the door. No maid ever comes in my room. So I go through a lot of things that I don't even tell people.
Yeah.
Because if you tell it, then you spoil your security. You don't want to do that. So we try to do the best we can. But what I've learned is, for example, I have learned this from well-known ministers who have had things happen that was weird. And some of them I'm not going to tell because I don't want to give anybody an idea. It's crazy, this loony, you know. So in case there is somebody loony watching. Now, so really, I call it PMS.
Yes.
It's pride, money, and sex.
Yes.
Seriously, it's PMS.
Oh, it is.
It's male PMS.
Yeah, that's
so
just what I'm
not trying
talking
to
about.
use an acronym
Yeah.
that sounds strange,
Yeah.
but that's usually whether it's Samson, whether it's David, whether it's Lot's situation, which was allowing drunkenness, whatever the situation is, you can just about trace it down to that. And so. The thing about the healing revival, and I think another thing, because we talk about one of those things being pride, is like you said about, okay, who had the greatest miracle, who had the biggest tent.
Yes.
And honestly, that shouldn't even be in a conversation.
Right.
You should get a big tent because you need it. And so I think that some of the guys that passed away, and I won't name them, that passed away early, I think the Lord just took them out. Now Branham had so many people that thought he was, he's the closest to Jesus of any man of this generation. The miracles were incredible. The words, he told people, he may have told Brother Littlefield this, but he told people, he said, "The Lord told me he's taken me." He said, because people are looking at me and lifting me up more than I should. And he said, God's not going to let that happen. He got killed in a car wreck right after that.
Yes.
He was killed in a car wreck. And
that.
everybody was so sad. And some of his people, this was not him, but some of his people thought, well, he'll raise in 3 days like Jesus. They didn't want to bury him. That's not what he told people. He told them he was going to go to be with the Lord because he said, I don't like the way people are looking at me. And God will do that sometimes if people do that. And the other thing I want to ask you is...
Let me just say one thing about Brandon.
Yeah.
He spent a week at my house. I don't know how to exactly put this, but he was almost in another world all the time.
All the time.
I mean, in another world totally. I mean, he blanked out everything around him. And
but he heard from the Lord like instantly, didn't he? It was unbelievable.
He was in contact with God all the time.
And someone asked me, what do you think the key was to his ministry? It was humility. Because
very
am I
quiet,
right?
humble.
Yeah,
person.
never took glory, never took
No.
credit, and didn't like when
Yes.
people did that.
Yeah.
Did you ever see him when he preached here? You saw him preach here. So did he operate in the word of knowledge back then, like calling people out, or in the prayer line, he would say certain things?
The word of knowledge is about all. That was his whole ministry almost.
Yeah. But when he would get a word, one time he said, "Now, if the Lord tells me about you, will you believe that He's going to do what you ask?" Yes. And he would go down the list. It's and never miss it. This is something that's important.
Yes.
That's what made him unique. But do you think this is going to be kind of an odd question, because this would be an opinion question with both of us? I do not believe this. I do believe this. I do believe that the Lord allows certain people to do certain things in their generation. Like our message now is kind of prophetic, prophecy, end time, coming of the Lord, He break roots, and I put all that together, and the Lord begins to show me things. I saw things about the election of 2016. I've seen things about this election, return of the Trump stuff, just a lot of things that at the time didn't even sound logical. But now people look back and say, wow, that was logical. It happened. So it had to be from the Lord. But I do not think, I have watched this happen with a few men where they felt as though they were called of God to reach the world, which is fine. Yeah. But they said they were the only ones doing it. And I saw falls come to these men. Because what happens is pride comes before destruction, haughty spirit before a fall. And I don't think there's anybody on planet Earth at all right now. Now, Billy Graham reached the world, we know that, but right now, I don't think there's anybody on the planet that is sole person that I am called alone to be the voice for the entire world. That's not how it works.
Oh, no.
Because the body of Christ is all these different parts and different members, And so if there's any young ministers, I know the young ministers love these stories. So, keeping pride out of your life, staying humble before God. And if you don't stay humble, God will humble you. So, it's one way or the other. It'll come. You don't have to worry about that. The income, always doing what you say with the income that comes in, not making money a central thing about your ministry. We've had to, I don't send out letters asking for money in 47 years. Nobody gets letters from me ever. But God has taken care of everything because He told me to trust Him. So I'm glad to do that. So that's why when He tells me to do a project, I don't worry. My statement is God's will, God's bill. So I'm glad for that. I'm glad for that. And the other thing is the attention, not only that people can give you, and if people start giving you attention, people say, oh, that was the greatest message since Paul. I told one guy, I said, when did you hear him preach? So he didn't realize what he was saying. But it's to always give God the glory. Never, ever take glory for a message, a revelation. Point it back to God. And the fourth thing is, like you talked about, with some of the men, is the opposite sex begin to maybe approach them, become flirty with them, become overly familiar with them, which can happen, of course. And that's where, again, I would suggest that any minister always have your wife involved close to your ministry. I know guys, for example, that do not counsel any female unless their wife, not their secretary, but their wife is there. And I have never, just so people know, I have people who say, well, Brother Stone, counsel me. I've never counseled anybody in my life. I made up my mind years ago, I'm not a counselor, I'm not a professional. I took the course in Lee, but that didn't make me a specialist. No. So I'm not a counselor. I'm not a professional counselor. I will pray for you. And you will say, Perry, will you pray for me about this? Do you have a scripture that would, well, there's a scripture. I'll do that. But I will not sit and counsel people. Now some of my very, very close friends, minister friends I've had, would ask me for advice on a building or how did you pray for income. That's a totally different thing. It's saying, advise me on how you think I should do this as far as a situation I'm in. I'm not saying I'm cutting myself off from that. But these are things that we need to look for. Now, did your dad ever give like prophetic words about what was going to happen in the future or great revivals were coming? Do you ever remember anything like that, or anybody that you ever heard that prophesied in the 50s that a big end time revival?
No.
You don't remember that?
Simple answer.
Yeah, no, really.
No, really.
Because that was not the time to talk about, that was the time to talk about healing and miracles.
That was it,
And now that we're in, that's what my daddy said. I said, Dad, why didn't you hear more preaching on the time of the end in your day? He said, because it wasn't the time of the end. He said, and we were preached that it is, But he said, your generation is the time of the end. He said, that's why you're getting all this. And I thought, you know, that's a great revelation. So not to be nosy, but you're 70.
I turned the big 80.
When did you do that? It was recent,
Last week.
Was it last week?
Yeah.
And by the way, if you came to our main event.
Charlie called me, where were you, Perry?
He keeps these things secret. You are also,
yes.
If you were at our main event and you came to the honoring the veterans, Lavoy spoke, and he's one of the highest decorated living veterans right now, highest decorated in the state of Tennessee, and you were honored for that.
Yes.
And I want to tell you, the guys loved it. We got so much. Lavoy, you just can't believe it. They just went on and on about that. And it was a great honor to have you there. But the reason I wanted him to come and share this with you, I want to talk about your mother, and we'll kind of wrap it up. Okay. Tell me about your mother's, during that time when you were a child, her prayer life, how God used her that you can remember.
Okay, let me tell you. Can I tell you one instance?
Oh, absolutely.
It's a quick one. The year was 1969. It was the height of the Vietnam War. They called it the Tet, T-E-T, I think, offensive.
Yes.
All right. We had a very simple mission. We went out, we set up a camp, and we were attacked, actually surrounded, by the Viet Cong. They shot we had a little triangle set up, three men, and they killed all the 9 men out front. So they came within 30 feet of me. They shot my second lieutenant. This was his first day on the job in Vietnam, right through the skull, and he fell on top of me. They shot my first sergeant, put him out of action in the knee, and later I found out they put a bullet hole in my canteen and also through my helmet. But it was 1 o'clock, it was 12 o'clock, midnight, because I had the midnight watch. So I was basically by myself. My first sergeant was laying beside me, but he was out of commission. He was shot in the leg, and it was just me. So I got on the phone, and we always set up artillery about 6 miles away, and I called and we always put our location, a grid marks, to the artillery, so they know exactly where we are. And they were very accurate. So I called them in and I said, send artillery in. They said, where? I said, on top of my head. They said, we have regulations here. We can't send artillery on the top of your head. And I said, I'm 10 minutes from being killed. Send it now, because I'm dead anyway. So they said, okay. I thought, okay, camera on me. At that very same moment, my mother had a junior choir meeting in the bottom of the old red brick. Remember that, Brenda? We got married in it, North Cleveland.
Yeah.
They did stress coat torn down now. She stopped the junior choir practice. And she said, everybody, my son needs prayer. And so she stopped the junior choir meeting, and at that, I did the time on it.
Right, check it out.
It was the moment. It was the moment that I was about to die. Okay. I could hear the artillery coming in, and I thought I was dead.
Yeah.
I got down, I was low, put the helmet over my head, and got ready to die. The artillery hit Perry. It hadn't been 30 feet away from me. It hit right on top of the Viet Cong.
Whoa.
It destroyed the Viet Cong charging in.
The whole group that had killed your
The
men.
whole group, a whole battalion. And I just kept on saying, send more, send more, send more. And about an hour later, a whole battalion of Americans, they got word, they came in, and there I was with me and my first sergeant sitting there.
The one that had shot in the leg.
Yeah, the one that shot in the leg. And
When did you find out that your mom had actually stopped and started interceding? When you got back, was it? Or how'd you find that
she
out?
sent me a letter.
And had
She
the
wrote
time.
me every single day.
That's a mama for you.
So that
But
was
how many-
a true miracle.
Totally. Back in the day, how many hours did she spend, like a week or a day, or did she pray in the morning? Did she have a habit, or just?
She prayed all the time. But particularly every Friday night, as long as I knew my mother, she prayed all night. All night.
Really?
And I stayed with her till about 9 o'clock and fell asleep every time. And Brittany can remember that.
Now, let's go back to your dad who saw all the miracles.
Yes.
And I'm going to give you my opinion. Ready?
Let's hear it, Perry.
My opinion is his secret weapon was your mother.
Perry, I think you had a revelation. I really believe that.
Because she would go through the line. This is what I was told.
Yes.
There was a prayer line, and she would walk past people, and she'd
Yeah.
say, honey, if you'll sit down for just a little bit.
Yeah.
And she would say, now, you're going to see miracles, but you're not ready to get prayed for
Yeah.
because your faith's not ready.
Yeah.
And she could tell who had faith and who did not have it.
Yes,
And so that's a gift.
it was.
That's a gift. It's a word of knowledge gift. Okay. So then when somebody would get a miracle, she said, you get back in the line when you feel faith, and they'd get back in the line. Okay.
Yes.
So I think that the prayers of her, I call it the secret weapons. There are secret weapons God has in prayer people.
Yeah.
Sometimes you'll never meet them. But I think that's what sustained the ability of the miraculous and the flow of the Holy Spirit through your dad.
Amen.
And then later on, there were some things that happened, not with her, but there were some things that happened. And you could tell there's a drastic change
Yes.
after she wasn't there.
Yes.
So the point
Absolutely.
is, if you have a good praying woman, hold on to her.
Absolutely.
Isn't that the truth?
Absolutely.
And if you have a good praying man, you better hold on to that man and pray for one another. But she saw her own miracles. One more thing that's coming to my mind, I'd like to get your opinion. Did you ever hear, a lot of people have not heard this, that Branham came in 1959 to Faith Memorial Church to preach.
Yeah.
Because Brother Littlefield knew everybody.
Right.
I mean, most people know.
Yes.
McPherson, Allen, I mean, he just knew them. I guess he went to the meetings or whatever. But Branham allegedly, and they said it is true, was staying here, and he would get visitations from angels of the Lord that would just stand there, and he could tell what they were thinking and give him his word. It's right, And he said that basically at the time of the end, before the Lord returned, Cleveland would be a hub of the end time revival. Had you ever heard that before?
No.
See,
but it's happened.
Yeah, no, it really has.
Yeah.
And now you have Omega Center International has 10 to 12 conferences a year where they come here, Warrior Fest, where hundreds are saved. And so it really is becoming a center more than anywhere right now. More than anywhere. Because you got Judy Jacobs, Karen Wheaton, Bill Cloud. You've got our conferences, and I'm missing somebody. There's a couple more that come. The different groups that come, different people that come. So I didn't know if you heard that. I was going to have you share if you remembered that, because not everybody heard that, but that was on I think it's on a recording somewhere, which more than likely it is. But the former pastor at Faith Memorial, what was his name?
Littlefield.
No, but after him.
Dupree.
Yeah, Dupree knew about it.
Oh, Jimmy Dupree.
Jimmy Dupree knew about it. He's a researcher anyway. So let me ask you this. So now that we're definitely in the time of the end, what do you think is going to happen, in your opinion? Just everything you see, church world, revival world. I mean, I know Joel 2 has to happen. There has to be an outpouring of the Spirit. So that's what I'm trying to build for and look for more than anything else.
I think there's going to be a joining together I think Charlie agreed with many of the big denominations.
Working together.
I think they're going to start working together.
I agree.
think it's happening now.
It is. That's a good word. Yeah, because Jesus said that they'll be one even as you and I are one, and we've never really got there. Mm-hmm. There's been too many frictions or who's going to be in charge. And I think that we're coming to the point.
You can see it now.
Yeah, you really can.
Yeah.
And people are starting to work together. Well, I think we got enough juice out of you to tell us some things that we needed to hear that we want to know about. But he's in the picture over here. He's way over here in that corner. See, they cut him off right there. They cut the picture
me off.
But, I tell you what's amazing. Now, remember, this is 1957.
Yeah.
And in the South, there was in the 60s, the segregation. But look at this audience.
Yeah.
It's white and black together.
It is.
And that, men like your dad helped break that.
I think so.
Billy Graham helped break it. Or Roberts helped break it. Because they told Billy, you can't have the mixed congregation. He said, oh, I will too.
Oh, I will.
Well, will you get in trouble? He said, well, take me on to jail. Because Billy loved souls. Mm-hmm. And when I look at this, and it dated 1957, and I see the black community, the white community, of course, some of these are Jamaicans and Haitians in different places as well. But it's just like, that's just really neat.
And the Jews started coming to my meeting, Deb's meeting here.
Really?
Yes.
Kind of out of curiosity, maybe?
TV brought them in.
Oh, wow. So they saw him and they wanted to see.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, you're like me, though. You have a really good heritage.
Thank
you.
you.
Good spiritual heritage. And the one thing about that, our folks prayed so much, you'll never get away from it.
Yes. Eddie Fisher's mom attended North Cleveland.
Yeah.
My dad's church.
Yeah. Oh, and at the Met.
Yeah, at the Met.
Really?
Yeah.
So a lot of people passed through there, didn't they? Mm-hmm. Well, thank you for taking the time. It's I don't even know what day it is. It's a Wednesday? So taking the time.
Yeah.
And I'll tell Charlie up front, the thing about his miracle in Vietnam needs to be put on a YouTube thing for the veterans. I'll get with you on that just whenever. So thank you. And if you think of anything else, write it down.
I sure will.
And we'll do it again because
Thank you.
We have to keep the stories going because the younger generation loves to hear this.
Thank you.
Because they want to see this again. The younger generation wants to see this. So thank you for the taping. Thank you for everybody who was a part of this. God bless you.
Are you ready to unlock profound prophetic insights and explore the mysteries of God's divine plan? Perry Stone invites you to dive into an extraordinary teaching resource that unravels ancient truths, spiritual warfare strategies, and end-time revelations. Introducing a dynamic collection of audio teachings designed to equip and inspire believers in this prophetic season. This powerful prophetic resource features 3 insightful audio CD sets, plus a bonus CD packed with surprising revelations about the rapture. The first teaching of the 2 CD set is titled The Battle of the Gods and Beasts, and dives into a stunning exploration of ancient false gods and their modern-day spiritual implications. Discover how Christ countered the dangerous idols of the Roman and Greek empires and how these revelations impact spiritual warfare today. The second CD examines the future 2 beasts rising, revealing how 2 demonically influenced men will fulfill key apocalyptic prophecies. The second 2-CD resource, Yahweh's Prophetic Clock, enters the much-debated subject of how God is counting prophetic time to establish the timing of the rapture. This teaching explains the mystery linked with the number 7 and the numerous other prophetic cycles and patterns. This eye-opening 2-hour teaching provides one of the clearest explanations of God's prophetic calendar, offering fresh insights that will deepen your understanding. The third audio teaching, When Angels Show Up, includes 2 compelling messages. The first reveals the angelic covenant of protection, an essential understanding for navigating this dangerous season. The second message, How to Release Angels During Prophetic Seasons, teaches how to access heavenly messengers during times of increased demonic and angelic activities as prophecies are being fulfilled. This is an important revelation on angels. We are also including a bonus CD, The Chaos of the rapture. Within 48 hours after the rapture, the chaos of Revelation 6 will be unleashed. Learn how millions of people missing and the atomic effect of the rapture and resurrection will send the world into darkness and complete confusion. This comprehensive teaching package includes 3 teachings, 6 CDs, plus the unique single CD on the chaos of the rapture, offering over 7 hours of prophetic teaching. For a limited time, you can receive this prophetic teaching package for a donation of $30 or more. Call us toll-free at 1-888-21-BREAD. That's 1-888-212-7323. Or order online at perrystone.org. Additionally, you can write to us at Perry Stone, P.O. Box 3595, Cleveland, Tennessee 37320, and enclose your gift of $30 or more to request CD package offer YP-147. This package is also available as a digital download on our website. We look forward to hearing from you soon.
If you enjoyed this YouTube content, there's an important website you should know about: perrystone.org. Perrystone.org is an essential resource for the latest books, audiovisual presentations, and digital products from Perry Stone Ministries, resources that cover the same kinds of topics discussed in the program you just watched. Stop in and see all that's available at perrystone.org.